The loudest screams are never heard, they're felt in silence. My friends, that's where I want to begin today. Because we've been sold a lie our whole lives, that closure comes from words, that strength comes from shouting back, that healing comes from long conversations. But the truth? Silence can do what 1,000 arguments never could. Silence can heal you, and silence can haunt them. It's the one response no betrayer ever prepares for. Now, before we dive deep, do me a quick favor. Press that like button, hit subscribe, and stay with me till the very end. Because today, we're not just talking about silence. We're going to turn it into your most powerful weapon. Hey folks, imagine this. You walk into a battlefield, swords clashing, shields breaking, warriors screaming, everyone swinging blindly, desperate to be heard. But then there's one man who doesn't fight, doesn't shout, doesn't even lift his sword. He simply steps back and watches. And suddenly, the whole battlefield feels his presence more than anyone else. That's what silence is. It's not running away. It's stepping out of chaos, so chaos crumbles on its own. We're told if you don't reply, you're weak. If you don't defend yourself, you've lost. But here's the paradox. They expect your words, your tears, your anger. That's the emotional script they've rehearsed in their head. They've already imagined your last message, your emotional breakdown, your desperate need to be understood. But when you don't give them that, when you go quiet instead, you rip the script right out of their hands. There's a quote I love: "Never waste your words on people who deserve your silence." Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. That's not passivity, my friends. That's power. And it hits harder than any scream. Because no one, absolutely no one, is ready to deal with the absence of someone who once cared deeply. It's like walking into a room that used to be full of music, and suddenly it's empty. That emptiness echoes louder than the sound ever did. Now, I know what you're thinking. But silence hurts me too. It makes me feel invisible. And you're right. At first, it does. Silence feels like a heavy stone pressing on your chest. But that's only if it's passive silence, the kind where you swallow your words because you're afraid. Strategic silence is different. Strategic silence is when you stand tall, look the storm in the face, and decide, I don't need to play this game anymore. That silence isn't weakness. It's your declaration of independence. Think about it. Every manipulator needs your reaction, like fire needs oxygen. They poke, they prod, they test, because as long as you react, they know they still have you. But when you cut off that oxygen, the fire doesn't roar louder, it dies out. Your silence becomes the suffocating air they can't breathe in. And suddenly, they're left with nothing but their own guilt. It's almost funny, isn't it? They thought your silence would set them free. Instead, it chains them to the very thing they tried to escape, their own conscience. That's why silence feels deadly, because it doesn't attack from the outside, it breaks them from the inside. So let me tell you folks, don't be afraid to step back. Don't be afraid to stop explaining, stop defending, stop giving people free access to your peace. Because the moment you stop responding is the moment you start rising. And the day you realize that your silence is louder than their noise, that's the day you reclaim your power. So, I want you to write it in the comments right now. 3 words that define your new identity. Silent, strong, free. Say it with me. Silent, strong, free. That's who you are becoming. Stay with me, because in this video, I'm going to show you exactly how silence, used with strategy, doesn't just heal you, it destroys the ones who thought they could break you. And remember folks, press that like button, subscribe, and let's walk this road together, because the most powerful revenge is saying nothing. Number 1, they believe closure comes from words. Silence is sometimes the most violent answer. That line cuts deep because it breaks the illusion they live in. They believe closure always comes from talking, from long conversations, from one last argument, from one last explanation. They think words will protect them, that as long as you're still speaking, they still have power. But silence tears that belief apart. Silence is the unanswered question they never wanted to face, and that's where everything starts to collapse. Imagine a stage where a play has been going on for hours. The actors keep speaking, yelling, defending, accusing. The lights are bright, the audience restless. Suddenly, one actor, the one they rely on most, steps off the stage and says nothing. No words, no farewell, just absence. What happens then? The play falls apart. The actors stumble. The audience grows restless. The spotlight burns on emptiness. That's what silence does. It doesn't just end the scene, it dismantles the entire performance. They tell you silence is weakness, that if you don't say your side, you'll be misunderstood. But think about it. Have you ever truly been understood by someone who betrayed you? Did your words ever pierce the armor of someone who was already set on hurting you? The lie is that words will heal what was broken. The truth is, words rarely reach those who don't want to listen. Silence, however, forces them to hear themselves, and that is unbearable. This is why they fight silence with everything they have. Because in silence, the mirror appears. Suddenly, they can't hide behind your explanations, your tears, your defenses. Suddenly, all they see is their own actions staring back at them, and that reflection is haunting. That's why they beg for a response, why they poke at you, why they send those vague messages designed to pull you back. Because silence means they must deal with themselves, and most betrayers are terrified of their own conscience. Ask yourself, why do they always expect you to argue? Why do they expect you to chase? Why do they expect that desperate text saying, "I miss you"? It's because they've rehearsed your role in their mind. They've written the script where you play the wounded one, the one who seeks closure, the one who begs. That's the story that allows them to walk away guilt-free. But when you rip up the script with silence, they're left without direction. No stage, no audience, no applause, just the heavy weight of what they did. And yet, silence isn't easy. It's tempting to type that long message, to pour out every thought, to scream your side of the story. The fear creeps in. If I don't explain, will they think they were right? Will they think I didn't care? But pause. Who cares what they think? The only reason you want to defend yourself is because you still believe your dignity rests in their perception. But Stoicism teaches us, dignity rests in your control, not in their approval. And silence is the ultimate act of control. There's a quote by Rumi that says, "Try to accept the changing seasons of your soul, even if it means you must remain silent during winter." Silence is winter. It feels cold. It feels barren. It feels endless. But winter is what prepares the earth for spring. Without silence, there's no rebirth. Without withdrawal, there's no strength. Silence feels hard because it demands you trust yourself more than their reaction. It demands you walk away from noise and believe that peace will find you in the quiet. Think of silence as a sword, a sharp, clean blade. Every word you throw in anger is like a dull weapon. It swings wildly. It may cause scratches, but it doesn't cut deep. Silence is the opposite. It slices without motion, without noise. It's not dramatic, it's precise. And when it cuts, it leaves a scar that words never could. That's why they crumble. That's why they panic. Because silence leaves them with wounds they cannot point at, cannot blame, cannot heal through manipulation. Of course, they'll try to flip it back on you. They'll say you're immature for not talking. They'll say you're cold. They'll say you're running away. But remember, this is projection. They want to drag you back into the noise. They want to reopen the stage where they feel in control. Don't fall for it, because the only thing weaker than silence is the fear of using it. Once you realize that silence isn't retreat, it's a strategy, you'll see how it shifts everything. So here's the truth, my friends. Silence isn't about punishing them. It's about freeing you, because the moment you stop needing to be heard by them, you finally start listening to yourself. That's the shift. That's the moment you begin to rise. They crumble in the void, but you rebuild in it. They see silence as loss, but you discover it as gain. And I want you to remember this affirmation. My silence is my strength. Write it in the comments. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world around you. Because the moment you embody that truth, something inside you changes forever. You stop chasing validation. You stop defending your worth. You stop bleeding words for people who never valued them. Stay with me, because what comes next is even more unsettling. How silence doesn't just confuse them, it triggers paranoia that eats them alive. We're going to peel back that layer, and you'll see exactly why silence isn't just absence, but the most devastating presence they'll ever feel. Number 2. The mirror effect. Silence is the mirror where truth finally shows its face. That one sentence explains why silence shakes betrayers to their core. When you go quiet, you stop giving them the distraction of your words, your explanations, your defenses. All that's left for them to face is their own reflection. And that reflection is not kind, it's raw, it's brutal, it's undeniable. They see what they did, and for the first time, there's no shield protecting them from it. Think of silence like holding up a mirror in a dark room. At first, nothing seems visible. The betrayer laughs it off, pretends they don't notice. But the longer they stand there, the more their eyes adjust. And suddenly they start seeing outlines, shadows of guilt, shapes of regret, images of their own actions staring back at them. And the frightening part? There's nowhere to run, because silence doesn't let them escape. Why does it work like this? Because most betrayers survive on noise. They thrive on your reactions, your arguments, your pleas for understanding. Your words create a smokescreen where they can hide from their own behavior. If you say, "Why did you do this to me?" they can twist it into, "You're overreacting." If you beg, "Don't leave me," they can spin it as, "See, you're too dependent." But when you say nothing, when you disappear into silence, there's no smoke left to hide behind. All that remains is them and the choices they made. Let's make it visual. Imagine standing in front of a pond. If you throw stones into it, the ripples distort the water. You can't see your reflection clearly because of the constant disturbance. That's what your words do for them. They disturb the surface, so they never see themselves fully. But when the pond is still, when no stones are thrown, the water turns into a perfect mirror. That's silence, the stillness that reflects reality with painful clarity. And in that reflection, they see the truth they tried so hard to avoid. Here's what runs through their mind in that mirror. Why didn't they answer? Did I push too far? Are they gone for good? What if they've stopped caring? These questions eat away at them. At first, they might brush it off, pretending they don't care, but silence is patient. It waits. It lingers. It doesn't fade like an argument. And over time, the questions grow heavier. There's a quote by Lao Tzu: "Silence is a source of great strength." And what makes it powerful is that silence flips the script. Suddenly, they are the ones doing the overthinking. They are the ones replaying old conversations, decoding emojis, searching for meaning where none is given. Your silence makes them paranoid. It's no longer you analyzing their words, it's them trapped inside their own head. And that's the cruel brilliance of the mirror effect. But here's the part that makes it difficult. You don't get to see the reflection. You don't get the satisfaction of watching them crumble. You don't get proof of their regret. And that's where many people break silence. They think, if I don't say anything, maybe they'll think I don't care. Maybe they'll forget me. That fear pushes you to break the mirror, to throw stones back into the pond, to distort the reflection again. But the truth is, their silence in response is not proof they're unaffected. It's proof they're drowning in the mirror, because silence isn't a stage for you to watch them. It's a battlefield inside their own conscience. Let's break another lie they believe. They think silence equals indifference. But real silence isn't coldness, it's confrontation without words. It's saying, "Look at yourself, because I won't say it anymore." And that terrifies them. Why? Because deep down, they know exactly what they did. They just didn't want to see it. And now, with no distractions left, they have to. Picture someone standing in front of an actual mirror after betraying someone. They try to smile, but it looks fake. They try to justify, but their eyes give them away. Silence works the same way. It unmasks them. It exposes the cracks in their pride. And no matter how hard they try to hold their head high, the mirror reflects the weight of their guilt. And here's the irony. The more they try to run from the mirror, the clearer it gets. They avoid it during the day, but it follows them into the night. They scroll through their phone, hoping for your name to pop up, just to escape the reflection for a second. But when it doesn't, the silence becomes unbearable. They start imagining conversations that never happened, replies you never sent, emotions you may no longer feel. And that, my friends, is the most haunting kind of punishment, the kind they give themselves. You might be wondering, but what if they never feel guilty? What if they never face the mirror? And that's the beauty of silence. It's not about them. Whether they face it or not, you've already won. Because silence is not just their mirror, it's your shield. It protects your peace while forcing them to wrestle with their conscience. You no longer need to know what they feel because you're no longer living for their reaction. Silence hands the burden back where it belongs. Still, let's not sugarcoat it. Choosing silence is difficult. It feels unnatural when every nerve in your body wants to scream, "You hurt me." But ask yourself, did screaming ever heal you before? Did it ever change them? Or did it only give them more fuel, more reasons to dismiss you? Silence isn't the absence of courage, it's the highest form of it. Because silence means trusting that the mirror is enough, that you don't need to hold their face to the glass. They'll see themselves when the noise dies down. So, my friends, hold that silence. Carry it not like a burden, but like a weapon, a quiet, invisible blade. Because every second you stay silent, the mirror gets clearer, and the weight of their reflection grows heavier. They crumble, not because of what you shouted, but because of what you withheld. That's the power they never expected. I want you to write this affirmation in the comments. My silence is their mirror. Say it, show it, believe it. Because when you embrace this truth, you no longer fear being misunderstood. You no longer need to argue for your worth. You no longer chase explanations that never come. You stand tall, you hold the mirror, and you let silence do the rest. And stay with me, because what comes next is even more devastating, the paranoia silence creates inside them. When every second without your voice feels like a knife, when every minute without your reply becomes an earthquake in their mind, that's the torment of unanswered silence. And that's what we're going to uncover next. Number 3, emotional paranoia. Silence is not empty, it's full of answers they never wanted. This is the part that truly rattles them, my friends, because silence isn't just the absence of sound, it's a breeding ground for paranoia. When you stop responding, you don't just withdraw your voice, you leave them with a void. And human beings hate voids. The mind is wired to fill in blanks, to invent stories when there are none, to interpret absence as rejection. So when you stop replying, when you don't give them what they expect, their own imagination turns into their punishment. Think of it like this. You're watching a suspense movie. The camera zooms in on a closed door. You hear nothing. The silence stretches. Your heart beats faster, not because of what you see, but because of what you don't see. You start asking, what's behind the door? What's about to happen? That's exactly what happens in the betrayer's mind. Your silence becomes the closed door. They can't see inside, so their brain starts writing terrifying possibilities. And those possibilities torment them far more than any words you could have spoken. Let's be honest, when you were betrayed, you probably expected a fight, an argument, a last conversation. You expected some kind of ending, even if it was painful. That's the same expectation they have. They expect you to cry, to demand, to chase. That's the script they've prepared for. But when all they get is silence, that script is useless. They don't know what scene comes next, and in that uncertainty, paranoia is born. At first, they may brush it off. They may laugh with friends and say, "Oh, they'll come back." They may post pictures online, pretending nothing happened. But at night, when the noise dies down, when their phone stays quiet, that silence begins to whisper. It whispers questions they don't want to hear. What if they're really gone? What if they've stopped caring? What if someone else is there now? And those questions aren't just thoughts. They become an echo chamber inside their mind. There's a reason psychologists say silence can be more disturbing than conflict. Conflict has noise, has closure, has release. Silence, on the other hand, is endless. It doesn't end with an apology. It doesn't explode and then fade. It lingers like a shadow. It follows them through the day. It hides in the pauses of their routine. It sits next to them at night, and the more they try to ignore it, the louder it grows. Imagine someone staring at their phone, waiting for a notification. Every buzz sends their heart racing, only to realize it's not you. Every hour that passes without your message is another dagger, and soon paranoia creeps in. They start checking old conversations, rereading your last words, decoding emojis that meant nothing at the time. They begin asking themselves, was that the last goodbye? Did I miss a sign? Did they already move on? The silence becomes unbearable because it doesn't provide answers. It forces them to create their own. And here's the irony. Silence turns their own mind into the enemy. It doesn't need to shout at them. It doesn't need to accuse them. It doesn't even need to remind them. Their own thoughts do the work. Their pride, which once told them you'd always be there, begins to crack. Their ego, which once thrived on your reactions, begins to tremble. And all because you stopped feeding them your energy. But let's acknowledge the truth. It's not easy for you either. Silence feels like you're surrendering control. It feels like you're fading into invisibility. You might think, what if they don't care? What if they never notice? That fear pushes so many people to break their silence, to send that last message, to make one last attempt at being understood. But pause and remember, paranoia doesn't show itself openly. You won't see their sleepless nights. You won't see the way they stare at your profile in secret. You won't see the way they ask mutual friends about you. Silence works in the shadows. Just because you don't witness the paranoia doesn't mean it isn't consuming them. There's a quote I love. The quieter you become, the more you are heard. That's the paradox. You don't need to scream to make noise in their life. Your silence is already louder than any words could be. Because it leaves them with no closure, no final word to cling to, no clear ending they can manipulate into their story. It leaves them dangling, and that dangling is torture. Picture a chess game. In chess, silence is like refusing to move. You simply sit back and wait. The opponent grows restless, starts second-guessing, wonders what you're planning, and eventually they make mistakes out of paranoia. Silence works the same way. You don't have to move, you don't have to prove, you don't have to explain. Just by not reacting, you force them into error. And the best part, the paranoia flips the power dynamic. Suddenly it's not you waiting for them, it's them waiting for you. They once thought they had control, but your silence has reversed the roles. They refresh their phone, they replay the past, they wonder if you're gone for good. And every second of doubt is a reminder that you hold the power they thought they had taken. But here's where you must rise above. Silence should not be used just to hurt them. That's only half the story. Silence must also be where you heal. While they crumble in paranoia, you must rebuild in peace. Use the silence not to obsess about what they're thinking, but to refocus on what you deserve. Because paranoia is their prison, but silence is your freedom. So, my friends, the next time you feel tempted to break the silence, remind yourself their paranoia is already doing the work. You don't need to explain. You don't need to prove. You don't need to chase. Every unanswered message, every ignored attempt, every quiet refusal is another seed of doubt planted in their mind. And over time, those seeds grow into a forest of paranoia they cannot escape. Let me leave you with this affirmation. My silence plants the seeds of their regret. Write it in the comments. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world around you. Because when you truly believe this, you'll stop fearing silence and start embracing it as the most powerful presence you can embody. And stay with me, because what comes next is even more revealing: the collapse of manipulation itself. When silence doesn't just create paranoia, but dismantles their entire strategy of control. That's where the real shift happens, and that's where you'll see how silence isn't just absence, it's absolute power. Number 4, the collapse of manipulation. Control only exists as long as you react. That's the hidden truth manipulators never want you to see. Their entire strategy is built on the assumption that you'll respond, that you'll defend yourself, that you'll fight back, that you'll always provide them with emotional fuel. But the moment you don't, the moment you sit in silence and refuse to play the part they've written for you, their whole structure begins to collapse. Think of manipulation like a puppet show. They pull the strings, and as long as the puppet dances, the show continues. The audience claps, the manipulator smiles, and everything feels under their control. But imagine if the puppet suddenly stopped moving, just hung there lifeless. The strings lose their magic. The manipulator looks foolish. The audience grows restless. The show ends, not with an explosion, but with an uncomfortable emptiness. That's what your silence does. It collapses the entire performance. They count on predictability. They know that if they mock you, you'll defend yourself. If they disappear, you'll chase. If they dismiss your feelings, you'll argue harder to be understood. They push buttons because they've seen you respond before. But silence is the day you cut the wires. Suddenly the buttons do nothing. Suddenly they can't predict you. And unpredictability is the death of manipulation. Ask yourself this: how many times did you play their game before? How many times did you explain yourself, justify yourself, beg for fairness, only to end up exhausted and unheard? Every word you gave them became material they used against you. If you cried, they called you dramatic. If you argued, they called you aggressive. If you forgave, they called you weak. But when you go silent, what can they call you? There's nothing left to twist, nothing left to use. And that silence is terrifying to them. There's a quote by Marcus Aurelius that says, "The best answer to anger is silence." But it goes deeper than anger. It's also the best answer to manipulation. Because manipulation needs noise. It needs dialogue, tension, emotional chaos. Without that, it dies. Silence is not just absence, it's suffocation. It starves manipulation of oxygen until it withers away. Picture a spider weaving a web. The web is delicate but deadly, designed to catch anything that touches it. The more the prey struggles, the more entangled it becomes. That's how manipulators work. The more you fight back, the more trapped you feel. But imagine if the prey never struggled, just stayed still. The web loses its power, the spider grows restless, and eventually the web collapses on itself. That's what happens when you choose silence. You refuse to struggle, and suddenly their entire system of control unravels. And yet, silence feels unnatural when you're used to reacting. You want to clap back, you want to defend your name, you want to expose their lies. But here's the lie you must break, that you need to fight in order to win. Fighting only keeps you in the arena they built for you. Silence removes you from it completely. And when the audience looks for you, you're not there. You've left them swinging at shadows, fighting battles that no longer exist. Of course, they won't admit defeat easily. When they realize their usual tactics don't work, they'll escalate. They'll send provoking messages, throw insults, use guilt trips, even pretend to apologize, all to get some kind of reaction out of you. Because reaction is proof they still have influence. But when you remain calm, when you give them nothing, the collapse speeds up. Their frustration grows. Their words lose weight. Their control slips through their fingers like sand. It's almost amusing, isn't it? They thought they were the master of the game, but your silence flipped the board. Now they're the ones scrambling, second-guessing, questioning themselves. They start asking, why didn't they answer? Did I lose them? Did I go too far? And in that paranoia, they expose themselves. Manipulators are only powerful when you give them energy. Take that energy away, and they shrink. But here's what makes silence truly powerful. It not only collapses their manipulation, it rebuilds your strength. Because every moment you don't react, you prove to yourself that you're no longer their puppet. You remind yourself that your peace matters more than winning arguments. You show yourself that self-control is your greatest weapon, and that's how Stoicism works, not by denying emotions, but by refusing to hand them over to someone who would only use them against you. Now let's break one more lie. They'll try to convince you that silence means you've lost. They'll say, look, you had nothing to say. That proves I was right. But remember, silence doesn't mean defeat. It means you've risen above the fight. It means you no longer need to prove anything. It means the battlefield they built no longer interests you. And nothing disarms a manipulator more than realizing their opponent has walked away, not in weakness, but in strength. Imagine a chess game again. If one player refuses to move, the game ends in a draw. But if one player simply stands up, walks away and says, I don't play this game anymore, the other is left staring at a board with no one to compete against. That's silence, not a draw, not a loss, just a refusal to play. And that refusal is devastating. My friends, silence is not surrender, it's strategy. It's not passivity, it's power. It's the moment you stop handing over the keys to your emotions and start locking the door. It's the invisible cut that severs their strings. And once the strings are gone, their power collapses with them. So here's the affirmation I want you to hold on to. My silence ends their control. Write it in the comments. Show it to yourself every time you're tempted to react. Because once you believe this, you'll realize that silence doesn't make you powerless, it makes you untouchable. Stay with me, because what comes next is even more transformative. How silence doesn't just collapse manipulation, but actually reverses the power dynamic. The very one who betrayed you, who thought they were in control, suddenly becomes the one waiting, wondering, desperate for your attention. That's the reversal of power, and that's where your strength shines brightest. Number 5, the reversal of power. The moment you stop reacting is the moment they start chasing their own shadow. That's the shift, my friends. That's the exact second the tables turn. For so long they lived in the comfort of your predictability. They knew your next move. They knew that if they pulled away, you would come closer. If they accused you, you would defend yourself. If they disrespected you, you would argue back. It was a cycle where they set the rules and you played along without realizing it. But silence, real, intentional, stoic silence, shatters the cycle. Suddenly you're not moving as expected, and the one who thought they had power finds themselves grasping at air. Think about this like a game of tug-of-war. They pull, you pull back. That tension gives both of you purpose in the fight. But what happens when you suddenly let go of the rope? They stumble. They fall backward. All their energy collapses into nothing. That's the reversal of power. You didn't win by pulling harder. You won by refusing to hold the rope in the first place. This is why silence unsettles them so deeply. It forces them into a position they've never been in before, waiting. And waiting for someone they thought would always be available is agony. They refresh their phone, expecting a message that never comes. They glance at your social media, hoping for a sign of weakness. They linger on your absence, replaying the last things you said, trying to decode silence into meaning. And all the while, the power shifts, piece by piece, from their hands back into yours. But here's what makes it even more devastating. It's not loud, it's not obvious. The reversal of power happens quietly, like sand slipping from one side of the hourglass to the other. At first, they don't even notice it. They laugh, they act unbothered, they pretend your silence doesn't matter. But deep down, their chest feels heavier. They wonder, why aren't they fighting me? Why aren't they begging like before? Why aren't they reacting? And that wondering is the beginning of their undoing. The human brain hates unpredictability. It craves patterns. Manipulators thrive because they know your patterns and can exploit them. But when you break the pattern with silence, you create a blind spot in their mind. Suddenly, they're dealing with ambiguity, and ambiguity creates fear. Neuroscientists call this ambiguity aversion. When people don't know what's happening, they assume the worst. And in relationships, the worst means they've lost control. Now, some of you may be thinking, but won't my silence make them think I don't care? Won't they just move on? And that's exactly where the lie lives. Because those who betrayed you don't want to move on. They don't want freedom, they want control. Your silence doesn't feel like release to them. It feels like rejection. It feels like being locked out of a house they thought they owned. They jiggle the doorknob, knock, and call your name, but the door doesn't open. That door is your silence, and it becomes the heaviest barrier they've ever faced. There's a quote from Seneca, "He who is brave is free," and silence is bravery in its purest form, because it frees you from their script. And in that freedom, something fascinating happens. They become the one trapped. The very absence that liberates you enslaves them. They are caught in loops of doubt, cycles of paranoia, endless wondering. And the harder they try to reach you, the more they realize they can't. That's the reversal of power. It doesn't shout, it doesn't bleed, it just exists. Picture this. They throw out a sarcastic comment, expecting you to snap. You don't. They send a vague message, hoping to reel you back in. You ignore it. They disappear, expecting you to chase. You vanish too. Each time you don't react, the power shifts further. Each time you hold your silence, the scale tips. Until one day, without even noticing, they're the ones orbiting you, trapped in the very cycle they created, desperate for your attention, desperate for your response. Of course, they'll mask it. They'll act like they don't care. They'll post pictures online, laughing with friends, showing off their new life. But pay attention, the louder they pretend, the more silent they feel inside, because silence leaves an echo, and echoes don't go away easily. The more they try to drown it with noise, the louder it rings in their mind. And here's the twist. The reversal of power isn't about making them weak. It's about reminding you that you were never weak. Because power isn't about who shouts the loudest, it's about who stays unshaken when everything tries to shake them. Your silence shows you that strength doesn't need an audience, it doesn't need validation, it doesn't need to be loud, it simply is. But let's be honest, this isn't easy. Silence feels unnatural when your emotions scream for release. You want to defend yourself, to tell your side of the story, to prove your worth. But every time you resist, every time you hold your peace, you're not just reversing the power, you're training yourself. You're building a kind of discipline most people never know, and that's what makes silence so rare, so powerful, so devastating in its impact. So what happens when the reversal is complete? They realize the person they thought they had control over is no longer there. They realize their words have no effect, their tactics no weight. They realize you don't dance to their strings anymore. And in that realization comes fear, because now they don't know who you are. You've become unpredictable, untouchable, unreachable, and nothing terrifies a manipulator more than losing the script. My friends, the reversal of power is not about revenge, it's about rebirth. It's about stepping off the stage of their drama and watching them stumble without you. It's about choosing peace over noise, dignity over chaos. And once you've felt it, once you've experienced the silence that turns the game upside down, you'll never go back. I want you to declare this in the comments right now. Silence makes me powerful. Write it, show it, prove it to yourself. Because when you believe it, you stop fearing silence and start wielding it like a weapon. And stay with me, because the next part cuts even deeper. We're going to talk about the cold cut. The difference between weak silence that makes you a victim and strategic silence that makes you untouchable. That's where silence stops being just a tool and becomes a blade that no one forgets. Number 6. The cold cut. A sharp blade doesn't need to scream when it cuts. It just leaves a mark that never fades. That's exactly what strategic silence is, my friends. A blade. Clean, sharp, precise. And like any blade, it can either protect or destroy. But here's where many people get it wrong. They confuse weak silence with strategic silence. One makes you a victim, the other makes you untouchable. One comes from fear, the other comes from clarity. One is passive, the other is powerful. Let's break it down. Weak silence is when you stay quiet because you're scared, because you don't know what to say, because you're paralyzed by insecurity. You swallow your truth. You shrink into yourself. You let the other person assume control. That silence doesn't heal you. It eats you alive. It keeps you up at night, screaming inside, while the world thinks you've moved on. That's not the silence we're talking about here. Strategic silence, on the other hand, is deliberate. It's intentional. It's not born of fear. It's born of strength. It's when you could respond, when you could argue, when you could send that message, but you choose not to. It's when you know your worth so deeply that you refuse to waste it on someone who couldn't see it. That silence is different. It doesn't suffocate you. It liberates you. And that difference changes everything. Imagine a surgeon with a scalpel. A careless hand can cause harm, but in the hands of a master, that same blade saves lives. Silence works the same way. In the hands of fear, it keeps you trapped. In the hands of clarity, it frees you. That's why Stoicism calls us to choose our silence with wisdom, not as an escape, but as a strategy. Think of it like standing in a storm. Weak silence is when you huddle in fear, hoping the storm will pass. Strategic silence is when you stand tall, unshaken, letting the storm roar while you remain unmoved. The storm doesn't change, but you do. You stop letting the chaos define you. You start defining yourself by your restraint. And that restraint is power. The hardest part? It feels unnatural at first. Everything inside you wants to react. You want to shout, to explain, to defend, to make them understand. But remember this, the need to be understood is the greatest chain manipulators use to hold you. As long as you're desperate to explain yourself, they'll keep pulling the strings. But when you cut that chain, when you say, "I don't need you to understand me," you step into freedom. There's a brutal beauty in strategic silence. It leaves no openings. It offers no closure. It creates no stage for drama. And because of that, it leaves a mark. They don't remember the words you screamed in anger. They don't remember the long texts you typed out at 2 a.m., but they will remember the silence. Because silence is unforgettable. It's an unanswered question that echoes in their mind. Picture this. They send you a provoking message. They expect the usual, you lashing out, defending, justifying. But instead, they're met with nothing. Hours pass, days, still nothing. That silence isn't just absence, it's a cold cut. A clean slice across the illusion of control they thought they had. And every time they look at that unanswered message, it burns. Not because of what you said, but because of what you refused to say. Weak silence begs for validation. Strategic silence returns responsibility. It's saying without words, deal with what you caused. Sit with your own actions. Face your own reflection. And that, my friends, is devastating, because manipulators thrive on projection. They throw their guilt onto you, and you carry it for them. But silence throws it back. Suddenly, they're the ones holding the weight, and it crushes them. But let's be honest, it takes self-control. It takes strength most people never develop, because silence demands you let go of the illusion that you need to win the argument. It demands you accept that your worth is not proven in their response. It demands that you trust time, trust truth, trust yourself. And that's not easy, but that's what makes it powerful. There's a line by Epictetus: if someone speaks badly of you, live so that no one believes him. That's strategic silence. It's not about chasing lies. It's not about proving your innocence. It's about living in such a way that the lies collapse on their own, and your silence is proof that you don't need their validation. You've already moved beyond it. Think about history. The greatest leaders, the strongest warriors, the wisest teachers, none of them wasted time arguing with everyone who doubted them. They knew silence spoke louder than defense. They knew absence could be more haunting than presence. And that's why their enemies remembered them, not for their noise, but for their stillness. So ask yourself, what kind of silence are you practicing? The weak silence that keeps you chained, or the cold, strategic silence that sets you free? Because once you taste the latter, you'll never go back. You'll realize that silence doesn't mean invisibility, it means invincibility. It means you no longer hand over pieces of yourself just to be seen. You've already seen yourself, and that's enough. And here's the part they'll never tell you. Strategic silence isn't just about them, it's about you. It's about the way it rewires your mind. Every time you stay silent instead of reacting, you train your brain to detach, to rise, to choose peace over chaos. You become less predictable, less fragile, less available for games. And slowly, you realize something life-changing. The power was never in their hands. It was always in yours. So here's the affirmation I want you to carry. My silence is my weapon. Write it in the comments. Show it to yourself every time you're tempted to break it. Because once you believe this, you stop fearing silence and start wielding it like a blade. Remember, a dull sword rattles, but a sharp blade cuts without sound. Be the blade. Be the silence that slices clean through manipulation, through guilt, through lies. Because silence, when used with intention, doesn't just end the game, it ends the entire stage they built to play it on. Stay with me, because next we're going even deeper. We're going to talk about how silence doesn't just end their control, it becomes the place where you are reborn. While they crumble in the void, you rise from it, and that's where your true power begins. Number 7. Rebirth in the void. Sometimes you don't grow when you add more. You grow when you finally take away. That's the paradox of silence, my friends. To them, your silence feels like punishment. To you, it becomes the ground of rebirth. They see it as absence. But you soon realize it's presence. The presence of your own self, finally stepping forward after being hidden under layers of noise, chaos, and manipulation. For so long, Your identity revolved around reaction. You were pulled into arguments, pushed into explanations, dragged into games that left you drained. Every time you tried to prove your worth, you handed away a piece of yourself. And what did you gain in return? Exhaustion, doubt, that quiet ache of wondering why your love or loyalty was never enough. But then silence enters, not as emptiness, but as space. And in that space, something remarkable happens. You meet yourself again. Imagine walking into a crowded room where everyone is shouting, dozens of voices pulling your attention in different directions. It's chaotic, overwhelming. But then, suddenly, the room clears. The noise vanishes. The crowd is gone. And for the first time, you hear something you didn't notice before, your own heartbeat. That's what silence does. It clears the room of everyone else's opinions, excuses, and manipulations so you can finally hear yourself again. That heartbeat? That's you. That's the beginning of your rebirth. But let's be honest, it doesn't feel like rebirth at first. At first, it feels like death. You grieve the words you never said, the endings you never got, the closure you thought you needed. You feel like you're disappearing, fading into irrelevance. And that's what makes most people break the silence. They confuse the pain of transformation with the pain of loss. But if you hold on, if you resist the urge to break, you'll see that what felt like death was actually the shedding of an old skin, a skin that no longer fit. Think of a snake. To grow, it must shed. The process looks brutal. It rubs against rocks, scrapes itself raw, leaves pieces of its old self behind. But without that shedding, it cannot expand. Silence is your shedding. It hurts because you're rubbing against everything you thought you needed: explanations, closure, validation. But what you're really doing is leaving behind an old version of yourself that cannot survive the new season you're stepping into. This is why silence isn't just a weapon. It's medicine. It doesn't only cut them down, it builds you up. It gives you space to breathe again, to rest, to heal. It gives you distance from the noise so you can finally see what you want, what you deserve, what you'll never accept again. The longer you stay silent, the clearer you become. The more you withhold your energy, the stronger it grows inside you. And soon, you realize something revolutionary. Your peace doesn't depend on their presence. It never did. They crumble in the void, haunted by guilt and paranoia. But you, if you embrace it, rise in the void, grounded in strength and clarity. That's the difference. Silence doesn't affect everyone equally. To the one who betrayed, it's a mirror of mistakes. To the one betrayed, it's the soil of rebirth. Two people standing in the same silence, but one withers while the other blooms. There's a quote I love. Sometimes when things are falling apart, they may actually be falling into place. That's exactly what happens in silence. At first, everything feels shattered. But slowly, the fragments rearrange themselves into something new. A new sense of worth, a new kind of boundary, a new kind of dignity. You begin to realize that silence didn't just take something from you, it gave something back. It gave you yourself. Picture a forest after a wildfire. At first, all you see is destruction, ash, smoke, blackened trees. But come back months later and you'll find green shoots breaking through the soil, life returning stronger than before. Silence works the same way. It burns down the illusions, the lies, the old attachments. It feels destructive, but in the ashes of what ended, your rebirth begins. And here's where Stoicism speaks so loudly. The Stoics taught that external chaos doesn't determine inner peace. Your response does. Silence is the proof of that teaching. You can't control the betrayal. You can't undo the rejection, but you can choose your response. And when your response is silence, not passive silence, but strategic silence, you step into mastery. You stop being a victim of circumstances and start being the architect of your own rebirth. But let's not pretend this is easy. Rebirth through silence requires patience. It requires resisting the temptation to run back, to break the stillness, to look for validation outside of yourself. It requires learning to sit with the discomfort until the discomfort transforms. But once it does, you'll see what so many never see. Silence isn't just the end of something. It's the beginning of everything. The very absence that once made you ache now becomes the presence that makes you whole. You stop obsessing about unanswered questions because you realize you don't need answers to move forward. You stop craving closure because you realize closure was never something they could give you. It was something you could only give yourself. And that, my friends, is freedom. That's rebirth. So what happens to them while you're reborn? They crumble deeper, because while you're healing in silence, they're decaying in it. While you're finding yourself, they're losing themselves. While you're rising, they're sinking. And that's the cruel twist. They thought silence would hurt you. They never imagined it would heal you and haunt them at the same time. Let me tell you this. Rebirth in silence doesn't announce itself. There's no applause, no celebration, no spotlight. It happens quietly in the moments when you choose peace over noise, restraint over reaction, growth over chaos. One day you wake up and realize you're not the same person anymore. The wounds are still there, yes, but they no longer define you. The scars are present, but they're reminders of strength, not weakness. So here's what I want you to affirm right now. In silence, I am reborn. Write it in the comments. Show it to yourself. Show it to the world around you, because once you declare it, you step into it. You remind yourself that silence isn't emptiness, it's expansion. It's not loss, it's liberation. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. And stay with me, because this journey doesn't end here. Rebirth is only part of the story. Next, we'll step into the most chilling chapter of silence, the final absence. The moment when silence isn't just a phase, but a permanent boundary. When you become unreachable, untouchable, and unshakable. And that, my friends, is the silence that truly destroys the betrayer. Number 8, the final absence. The most painful goodbye is the one that is never spoken, but silently lived. That, my friends, is the ultimate truth. The silence that doesn't pause, doesn't wait, doesn't hope for a return. It's the silence that closes the door for good. This is what I call the final absence. Not the kind of silence that leaves a crack open, not the kind that secretly hopes they'll come back. The final absence is different. It's complete. It's final. It's the kind of silence that doesn't just echo in their mind. It destroys the illusion that they'll ever have access to you again. Let's be clear. The final absence is not revenge. It's not about punishing them or making them regret. It's about you realizing that your energy, your presence, your heart are sacred. And sacred things are not handed out freely to those who trample them. When you reach this level, you no longer need to prove anything. You don't need explanations. You don't need apologies. You don't need closure. Because the absence itself is closure. Picture a theater. The betrayer expects the play to go on, expects you to take your place on stage, to deliver your lines as usual. But instead, the curtains drop, the lights go out, the audience leaves, and the stage, empty. That's the final absence. They expected the show to continue, but it never does. And that emptiness is heavier than any words you could have spoken. You see, throughout this journey, silence begins as confusion for them. Then it becomes a mirror, then paranoia, then the collapse of manipulation, then the reversal of power. But the final absence, that's where it all ends. That's where the silence becomes permanent, where they realize not only are you not reacting, but you're not even available to react anymore. And that, my friends, is devastating, because here's the truth. They always count on your return. They leave thinking you'll chase. They disrespect you thinking you'll defend yourself. They betray you thinking you'll forgive. That's the cycle they rely on. But when you disappear completely, when you withdraw, not just your words, but your entire emotional presence, they're left with nothing. No script, no stage, no audience, no you. Think about the ocean. When the tide pulls back, you assume it will always return. That's the nature of tides. But imagine if one day it didn't. Imagine standing at the shore, waiting for the waves, and realizing the ocean has pulled back for good. That's the final absence. They wait, but nothing comes back. They watch, but no waves return. And the longer they stand there, the more they realize it's over. Now let's address the hardest part. Getting to this point isn't easy, because silence feels unnatural in the beginning. Everything in you wants to break it, to fill the void, to get one last word. But when you hold on, when you push through, when you finally choose to walk away completely, you feel something you've never felt before. Freedom. Real freedom. Not the kind that comes from their approval, but the kind that comes from knowing you no longer need their validation at all. And that's when something inside you shifts. You stop waiting for them to see your worth. You stop hoping they'll wake up and change. You stop replaying old conversations in your mind. Instead, you begin to live again, to laugh again, to build again. And the best part? You do it without needing them to witness it. You do it for yourself, not for their regret. The final absence is not coldness, it's maturity. It's the understanding that not everyone deserves access to you, that not every person deserves another chance, that your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. And when you live that truth, something powerful happens. You become unreachable, untouchable, unshakable. And that's when the betrayer crumbles completely, because what hurts them most is not your scream, not your anger, not your revenge. It's your absence. It's realizing they no longer have the power to provoke you, to control you, to manipulate you. It's realizing you've stepped off their stage for good and they'll never get another performance. Let me tell you this, absence weighs heavier than presence when the heart expected you to stay. That's why silence is feared. It exposes their dependence, their ego, their need for control. And when they come back, when they test the waters, when they try to pull you back into the cycle and they find nothing, no response, no reaction, no interest, that's when it finally breaks them. Because the person they expected to find is gone. But the beauty is, you're not just gone, you're transformed. You're not the same person they betrayed. You're stronger, wiser, more guarded. You've been through the fire of silence and came out forged like steel. And that version of you, that's the one who will never settle for less again. That's the one who knows their worth without needing permission. That's the one who doesn't beg for attention because they've realized their peace is priceless. So, my friends, the final absence isn't about them at all. It's about you. It's about reclaiming your story. It's about writing a new chapter that doesn't include their manipulation, their betrayal, their drama. It's about living your life in such a way that the past can no longer touch you. And when you do that, when you truly step into that silence, you win. Not loudly, not dramatically, quietly, elegantly, powerfully. Here's the affirmation I want you to write in the comments. I am untouchable. Because that's what the final absence makes you. Untouchable, unshakable, unreachable. Not because you've turned to stone, but because you've learned to protect your soul. And if this message struck something deep inside you, if it reminded you of your own strength, then press that like button right now, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because this isn't just about healing from betrayal, it's about becoming someone no one can break again. The final absence is not revenge, it's evolution, it's peace, it's power, and once you've reached it, you'll never go back.